everybody. I'm Mary Dell. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Mary Dell.
I am so nervous. I can't believe it. That's the ego getting in the way, isn't it? Brothers and sisters of AA, brothers and sisters of Al-Anon, I want to thank you for inviting me. I was not the first choice, which really bugs me. When Jean had to pull out, then there was a second person that was asked, and I found out yesterday that my sponsor was to be asked. And my sponsor suggested that I be asked. You didn't tell me about that, Max. Anyway, I'm glad to be here. My little talk I call my parade because I kind of see my sobriety as a parade. I was always a couple blocks off. I have no excuse from the family that I was born with. I had a wonderful childhood. I was spoiled rotten. I was the middle of 5 daughters. My dad was bigger than life, really fun, drank a lot. My dad used to say, let's get drunk and be somebody. And I followed that suggestion. I know that we share this feeling that I had when I was young, that I never really fit in. I presented myself as somebody who really fit in. And I presented myself at the top of my game. But I never believed inside that I was. And even in a bunch of friends, in a group of friends, I had the feeling of anxious apartness that's talked about in the 12 by 12. When I read that the first time, I went, wow, anxious apartness. Yeah, that's what I had. I was a good little teenager. I was a cheerleader. My husband joined the parade when I was 13. He was 13. And my first drinking experience with friends was at the A&W restaurant, which used to be on Broadway. And my husband was out of town at a game, and the cheerleaders didn't get to go on that road trip. So the mice were away, and so the cat was away, so the mice got to play. And somehow 4 of us scored a 6-pack. I don't remember how, but we're probably 16, 17. And there were 4 people, and in a 6-pack are 6 beers. And I can remember making darn sure that I got a second beer. And I wondered later on, thinking back on it, if that was really true or if that was something I just made up in my head. And so I asked a friend not too long ago, went up to Sioux Falls and went out to lunch with her, and I said, do you remember that? And she did. And I said, do you remember me having 2 of the 6? And she said, you bet I did. I was the other one that had 2. In my 20s, I went to University of Colorado, which was a big drinking school, Coors beer, and drank a lot. Don't know how I graduated, but I did. And I came back to Yankton to go to law school. And I managed in my mid-20s, early 20s, to go to law school and have 2 babies. And we moved to Denver, and my husband worked during the day, and at night I would take off for law school at University of Denver. And managed to graduate, and my father always wanted his 5 girls here. So we all moved away, and we all ended up moving back. And usually he would make our husbands an offer that they couldn't refuse. And that's what happened with my husband. My dad called him and said, come back to Yankton and go to work for me. Now, I know it wasn't that he wanted my husband to go to work for him, but he wanted me back in Yankton. So I came back to Yankton and couldn't find a job as a lawyer because, it was very strange to have women lawyers at that time. And I got offered a job as a legal secretary, carried a resentment about that for years and years. But finally I was hired on, and the day after I had my youngest child, in 1977, I got a call in the hospital from the circuit judge at that time, Judge Hertz, and he said, congratulations, and I said, thanks, and he said, do you want to be a judge? And I said, whoa, can I think about it? And he said, do you need to? And I said, I guess not. And he said, okay, you start a week from Monday. So my third child was premature, so he had to stay in the hospital. So I went and started a new job as a judge. And at night I'd go to the hospital and spend the night at the hospital with him until he was big enough to go home. So at 29, I became a judge, and I did that for the next 31 years. And drinking changes for a woman when you get into your 40s. Now, I am thrilled to see young women in the program. I mean, it just drives me crazy. It makes me so happy. I had to get into my 40s, and in your 20s, party, college, everybody's drinking, it's okay. 30s, young couples get together on the weekends, get drunk, it's okay. 40s, the parade narrows down. It's not a group anymore. And in the 40s, my parade narrowed down to me. I drank alone. When I would drink with somebody, it'd be a sister, and she was the only person that I could drink with the way I wanted to, okay? So judge by day and drunk at night, and after everybody was sleeping. And I would write great theses under the influence of alcohol, and I'd make great scrapbooks and write poetry, and I thought that I was really inspired when I was drunk, And the next morning, I would wake up and I would swear that that day I wasn't going to get drunk. And that night, I got drunk again. And no one ever said anything. No one ever said anything about my drinking, except for one person, my husband. And he really hated to say something to me about my drinking because, I would get bitchy. And I'd also get very ashamed. And I would be very perplexed. I would be completely baffled as to why I did it over and over again. I was discontented. I was uneasy. I didn't feel right until I had a drink. I drank after I got drunk. I kept drinking after I got drunk. And it was all terribly confusing. For a period of time, I thought I was the bad seed, I thought I was bad, because it really hurt my husband when I drank and got drunk. And I knew I had to be hurting my kids. I knew I had to be emotionally absent, even though I was at every game, I knew I was letting down friends because I would have wonderful ideas at night, call them up and plan a trip, and never mention it again because I didn't know it. I was in a blackout. Towards the end, I kept a pad of paper by my bed, and I knew enough if I was going to use the phone, that I needed to write it down so that in the morning I'd know that I'd made that phone call. Because I went to blackout, every night. And, I had some horrific experiences drunk, but no more than anybody else. No fancier escapades than anybody else. No less fancy than anybody else. Just a little bit different flavor, a little bit different color. But I experienced everything that every single one of you alcoholics experienced. And in my early 40s, that's what I lived. That's how I lived. Judged by day and drunk every night. And we would plan wonderful holidays. And my husband would pick out a new island in the Caribbean that we were going to go to that winter to get away from the cold weather. And I'd take a week off work, and we would go to some wonderful island, Virgin Gordo and Grenada. And I would be in absolute terror as to what was going to happen on that holiday. How was I going to be able to drink? And most holidays I did okay the first couple days. I exercised that iron will, and I would only have the 2 acceptable drinks. But by the 3rd night, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. And I got drunk. And one particular time I remember being in Orange County, and somehow we ended up in an Irish pub the 3rd night of the vacation. And I ended up drinking Irish whiskeys and Drambuie and everything Irish, I don't know. And the next morning I went into blackout. I don't know what else happened that night, but in the morning I woke, came to, and I looked across the room, and my husband was sitting in a chair in the hotel room with that look on his face. God, I hated that look. I just hated that look. And he said, why? Why did you do that? And I said, I don't know. I didn't know. I honestly did not know. And I remember him saying, you must have really low self-esteem. Always trying to figure out an angle as to why I would do it. I'd say, yeah. And once in a while, I would promise to only drink 2 drinks. Once in a while, knowing that it wasn't going to happen, but keep him around. I wanted him around. I didn't want him to leave. And so, another beautiful vacation, Virgin Gorda this time. And the 3rd night, I got drunk and I was dancing with, I don't know who I was dancing with, but I always thought I was a great dancer when I was drunk, And I got really drunk. And the next morning I came to in this nice little thatched hut, in the sand and paradise, hungover. Husband's not around. Got to go looking for him. Don't want to. Know what's going to happen. He's going to have that look again. And kind of a little light flickered. A little light flickered. And I thought, you know what? I'm doing this because I'm an alcoholic. And I've got to get some help. But I didn't say it out loud to anybody. And fast forward through all the trials and tribulations to 1992. and we're going out to Fleegs. And I always had a couple of good stiff drinks before we went out to eat, because when I was with my husband, I could only have one or two, so I get drunk before we go. And I usually was okay, but that particular night I overshot the mark. And I was pretty loaded on the way to dinner. And we got out there, and I ordered a vodka tonic. And the strange thing about that was, in the days when my drinking was okay with my husband, I drank scotch. And many years before I sobered up, I switched to vodka, of course. I mean, which woman alcoholic doesn't switch to vodka? I don't know. Are there any out here? Because I've never seen one, except for you winos. Yeah. Anyway, the waitress came up to us, and I mistook her for somebody else. And I asked her if she was still living with so-and-so. Okay. Nobody in the place would have known the significance of that boo-boo, except my husband, because she just was confused. She knew that I had her mixed up with somebody else. But my husband knew that I knew who she was, but I was getting it screwed up because I was drunk. And they had just set our pork chops down. I remember exactly what we ordered that night, pork chops. And he said, "Let's go." And we left. And we're driving on Old Highway 50 out here. And in my imagination, there's a little bridge that you cross about Whiting Street, And as we drove over that bridge, I said out loud to my husband, who was in a position to hear me say it, "I can't do this anymore. I've got to get help." Now, when you say that out loud, you can't not say it. Too late. So in the morning, when I decided maybe I didn't want help, I knew I had to get it. So I went about calling treatment centers the next morning. It was a Sunday morning. And Monday morning, I met with the chief judge, and I said, I'm going to have to be leaving for 30 days. He said, "For what?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to alcohol treatment." He said, "Really?" And I said, "Really?" And he was tremendously gracious. And he said, "Okay, we'll do anything we have to do to help you. Can you give me 30 days to make arrangements for another judge to take over for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I can give you 30 days. So I made arrangements to go to treatment. And a lawyer, a fellow lawyer friend, said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Keystone. It's, close to home, and it'll be easy for the kids and Mike to get up there and see me." And he said, "No, you're not. You're going to Hazelden." And I said, "Well, I don't want to be that far away." And he said, "You're going to treatment for you, not for them. They can work around it. This is for you." And he had gone to Hazelden, and it was no knock against Keystone, which I would later enter, but anyway, I made arrangements to go to Hazelden. And on September 18th, 1992, when you go to Hazelden, what they do is, if you're going to fly in, and I knew I had to fly in because I would never make it driving. I would never have made it. I would have been dead or killed somebody or something. I would have been drunk for sure. And another lawyer that I knew, that I worked with, said, I just want to give you a piece of advice. Go into treatment sober. Because if you go in drunk, you just waste a couple days in detoxing. If you go in sober, you can really start with treatment. And, that made tremendous sense to me. So I said, okay. So I was thinking about going. I thought, well, that means I can't drive because I'd be drunk, I can't have my husband drive me because I'd be crazy by the time I got there, And so at that time, we had a little airplane service between Yankton and Minneapolis. Remember that? And you could fly, direct flight, and it was a little plane, so there were no cocktails on this plane. And I thought, safe. That's the easy way to do it. That's the safest way to do it. I can go in, be sober. So what they do is they ask you what you'll be wearing, and they tell you to meet them at Carousel 16 in the luggage carousel in the bottom of the Minneapolis airport. And they give you an 800 number if they're not right there when you get to Carousel 16. So I flew in that morning. I was sober. And got to Carousel 16. Now, I had some major suitcases going on here. I mean, I was going to look good in treatment, right? We had some major suitcases, and I get down to 16 and got my luggage sitting there, and I'm looking around, like, where is this person? I'm dressed in my black boots, my black jeans. I don't know, kind of motorcycle thing going on then, I guess, but black leather jacket, which I told them I'd be wearing. And they don't show up. So I go over the phone and I call this 800 number, and she said, we are so sorry. Our van broke down. But we sent a second van out. Are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. No problem. And they said, well, just stay right there, and we'll be there in a few minutes. Okay, so here I am in the airport. And we all know what's in an airport. The airport bar. I took those escalators about 3 at a time up to the main floor, left a suitcase with all my worldly possessions in them, down at Carousel 16, hit the bar, and I thought, okay, this is the last thing that I'm ever going to drink in my whole life. What's it going to be? And I thought, I'm going to go with tequila because, that'll give me a major hit quick. So I said, give me a shot of tequila and a beer chaser. And he said, large or small? And I said, large. Like, what do you think? And it's about 10 o'clock in the morning, I suppose. And threw down the tequila, drank the beer really, really, really fast, and bombed on down to the escalator. Nobody was there. So I did it again. Now, I'm telling you this story just so that you know I qualify to be here. I'm not proud of it. So I went up, and that time I had 2 shots of tequila and a large beer. And the fresh lime, of course, and the salt, the whole deal. Okay, so now we're down at 16, and there's a lady looking around, And she said, are you Mary Dell? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. And she said, okay, well, let's get out to the van. Now, Mary Dell, I'm really sorry, but we have to pick up somebody, Alan, from Chicago, and he's very drunk, so I hope it's going to be okay. I said, no problem. Alan climbs in. Alan is just shot. I mean, he is major drunk, hysterical, stockbroker from Chicago. And we take off for Hazelden. Well, it's about 30 minutes north of the Twin Cities, and we no sooner get on the highway as Alan says, can we stop for a drink? I just thought, The nerve. We're on our way to alcohol treatment, and he's asking to stop for a drink? Well, they also have this policy at Hazelden, bless their heart, that they want to, if you're drunk, they want to keep you drunk till they get to a safe place to detox you, so you don't seize up or something on them in the van. So she said, well, yes, we can. Mary Dell, do you mind? And I said, no, that'll be okay. So there's a little bar at the end of the drive to Hazelden, and they stop at this bar all the time. So, they saw the van pull up, and here we go dragging in there, and Alan and I sit up to the bar, and the bar lady says, what do you have? And Alan says, I want a triple Stoli on the rocks. I thought, I want to marry you. And I said, that sounds good to me. So now we're talking 3 shots of Stoli, and my cigarettes, of course. I'm up at the bar drinking. I mean, this is really fun, And Alan and I are visiting, and he drinks his down real fast and orders another one. And so, of course, I order another one. And then he decides that he's maybe not feeling so good. So he says, I got to go now. And so the man driver says, okay, let's go. And I said, stop the music. I did not ask you to stop at this place. But now that we're here, I'm going to finish my drink. And she said, well, that sounds fair. We'll wait for you in the van. So I drank my first one. I drank my second one. And I drank Alan's second one. So when I walked into Hazelden, I was pretty well shot. But I tell you that so that you understand that I qualify. Was I drinking like an alcoholic? Yeah, I was. I thought those people at Hazelden were the greatest people I'd ever met, and they're all so pretty and just dressed so cute, and I was just greeting everybody, and then they assigned me to the detox ward, Sister Ignatia, Iggy, we called it. And I ended up being in there. They couldn't believe that I didn't have a seizure or go into some kind of major because of the alcohol that I consumed. But I guess I'd built up a tolerance. And I stayed there, and it, saved my life. And I became acquainted with AA. Now, I want to tell you, I don't know if there's anybody in the world that loves AA as much as I do. It's my favorite thing to do, to go to an AA meeting. Really. And I love it. And we sober up with strangers. We sober up with strangers. My first AA meeting, they let us out of the cuckoo's nest one night to go to an AA meeting about 10 miles from Hazelden. And there were a bunch of old guys, fishermen. They look like fishermen to me. And they were just great. They're just great. And I listened to those guys, and I thought, God, that's just like me. They talked about telling their wives they'd be home at 9 and getting home at midnight. I used to do that. They used to tell me about swearing off. I used to do that, That's what I did. And I associated mentally with those alcoholics at my very first meeting. And I have ever since. But I had to come back to Yankton. And I now had to come back the sober judge. And I would sentence somebody to AA in the morning and then see him at the noon meeting. And, you know, I was not popular. I was not popular. And those days I didn't realize that it wasn't me that they were so angry with. It was, they were angry at the judge, and it would have been anybody, you know. It just happened to be me. And I went to AA every day. And my first meeting was on Monday because I flew in Sunday night. And I walked in, and there was Bill and Bob. Bob and Bill Bailey. And I thought, this is really cool. They've got a Bill and a Bob at every AA meeting. That is really neat. And those two guys took me under their wing. I mean, they took me under their wing. And I started to think about AA as kind of a cool fraternity. You know, I actually was kind of proud to be in AA. And sometimes I kind of went overboard, but I got a sponsor, and I loved her, and she loved me. She didn't love AA. So I'd go to AA meetings, and then I'd meet with her afterwards and tell her what went on in the meeting. She'd go to one, maybe 2 meetings a week. And life proceeded. And I went through the steps, and I told my sponsor my big secret. You know, we all have a big secret that we're going to hold on to, and that will eventually get us drunk. And I told her my big secret, and she didn't flinch. She didn't flinch. She loved me just as much after I told her my 5th step as she did before. And I went on to make my amends. And it took me, and I'm not proud to tell you folks this, but it took me about 2 years to make amends to my husband. I would go to a step meeting, and it'd be the 9th step, and you know he was at the head of the list. And I would pledge to walk in the house and make my amends that night. And I'd walk in the house, and I'd lay eyes on him. I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. Well, one day, Sunday morning meeting, I think it was Bill Bailey and I decided we wanted a church meeting, something on Sunday morning. So we started that Serenity meeting at 8 o'clock Sunday morning. And I don't know what we read out as Bill sees it, something about, must have been about amends. And I went home. And I said, Mike, please sit down. I have to talk to you. And I said, do I have your permission to make my amends to you? Because I learned that you just don't go throw your amends at people. You ask their permission. And you go see them. Unless you can't because they're past or you don't know where they are. And I made my amends to them. And you know what? I meant it. I really, really meant it. It wasn't like all those times I said, I'm sorry. You know? It had some meat to it. You know? I meant it. And I felt great. I felt great. With my kids, with my mom, you know, they all said, well, you know, we didn't even know you were an alcoholic. We didn't, you know, you don't need to make amends to us and all that. But I felt great. So the story goes on. My sponsor gets cancer. And she's dying. And it's just ripping my heart out, you know. But we worked the program. And I think I told folks Friday night that that we're also fear-based, you know. We find that out by doing our 4th step, that my life was run by fear. And so I said to her one night, I said, okay, what are you afraid of about dying? And she said, I'm afraid to leave my daughter, Allison. I said, okay, well, why? So we wrote it down. And she won't be there. I won't be able to teach her how to cook. I won't, make sure she stays in the church. All of her fears, I won't be there to tell her I love her, So I said, okay. My sponsor had a bunch of sisters, big Irish Catholic family, and I said, don't you have a sister that was a nun? She said, yeah. And I said, can't you turn over her religious life, her direction to your sister? Don't you trust her? She said, yeah, I do. I said, well, let's call her. So we went down with every fear, and we found another sister to take care of each and every one of the good cook in the family. She turned that over to her. And together we relieved some of her fears about dying, And I was sober when she died. I was right by her bedside, And after she died, I asked her sponsor to be my sponsor, Jerry O. And Jerry O was my sponsor until she died from cancer. Now, about this time, I'm thinking, I wonder if sponsoring me has something to do with this cancer business. So I don't ask anybody to sponsor me. So Max, my beloved sponsor, who is the most spiritual person I know, walks up to me at the women's meeting, and she says, you can ask me to sponsor you, I won't die. At least not today, And she became my sponsor. And we love each other, and her husband is sort of my ex officio Al-Anon sponsor, because he's about the coolest Al-Anon you'll ever meet. And I've been working an Al-Anon program. Now that I'm retired, I retired 6 years ago, and now that I'm retired, I live in California part of the year, Palm Springs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I retired from the bench when I was 60. And when I was 55, my husband and I were 55, he said, I'm going to retire. I'm going to sell the business. I want to buy a house in Key West. And I was eligible to retire at that point when I was 55. And I said, okay, let's do it. I couldn't retire. I don't know why, but I just couldn't do it. So I ended up doing another 5 years judging, and he retired. He sold the business. We bought a house in Key West. And for a year, he was in Key West going to massage therapy school. And I was in Yankton working, and I would fly down and see him. And go and see him for, a week at a time, as much vacation time as I could afford to take off. And I think my relapse probably started then. I don't know who said it to me. I give Max credit for it. I give Mike credit for it. I don't know who said this to me. But they said maybe my relapse had to do with people stopped standing up when I entered the room. Because for 31 years when I entered the room, you all had to get off your lazy butts and stand up, Well, it is true that people stopped standing up when I entered the room. I don't know that had anything to do with my relapse. People want to know why, so that it doesn't happen to them. Tell us why. And I tell them the same thing I told Mike that morning in Orange County. I don't know. I got drunk because I'm an alcoholic. And that's all the explanation I have for you. I suppose my first sponsor died. I suppose retirement. I suppose being separated, from my husband logistically for that year, all built into it. I wasn't spiritually fit anymore. So I got drunk. And that was after 14 years of sobriety. And I feel bad about it. But you know what? I'll tell you what. I'm here to tell you about that relapse so that you don't have to have one. We hear in AA, when you relapse, you take off at the same point. You start at the same point as if you'd been drinking the whole time you've been sober. People have told you that, haven't they? It's true. It's true. You don't start from square one. I'm not back at when I'm 16 drinking one beer and getting giddy. I drank like I'd been drinking those 14 years I'd been sober. And that's the truth. So do anything you have to do not to have that happen to you. It took me about 2.5 years to get back. I went to treatment at Keystone, great facility, wonderful people. I loved my time there. I kind of looked at it as a spa, and but I drank after I left Keystone, and I built up a year once. I built up 90 days once. I don't know. When you get a case of the F-its, screw it, once you drink, then you drink. So you figure you might just keep on drinking. And it was bad because now I really had to drink alone. And I remember one day we bought a house in Palm Springs, and I was in Palm Springs by myself. And I was drinking really heavy when my husband wasn't around. I was drunk pretty much all day. And I woke up one morning, and I was really hungover. I think I'd gotten onto champagne the night before or something screwy thing. But anyway, I was really hungover. And I thought, well, I got to have some vodka, bring this thing around, bring this ship around. Well, if you've ever tried to turn a battleship around, that's what I was facing. And I had a little orange juice. I always drank something in my alcohol. I was like a drunk with standards or something. I don't know. But anyway, I put a little OJ and a ton of vodka. And I thought, if I can just get this down now, I'll turn the battleship around, I'll feel better. And I got that drink down. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And I can remember pacing around, that little condominium, back and forth, thinking, oh, shit, what am I going to do now? It's not working. And I was so filled with anxiety. And my need for relief was really running high. Do you remember the days when you needed relief? So you drank for the relief that the alcohol gave you? My relief was really running high. My need for it. And the alcohol wasn't giving it to me. And I thought, I am screwed. And I think I mentally just decided this is the way it's going to be. And I flew back home to Yankton. And my husband was gone somewhere, and so I was drunk. And my son called me about 9 o'clock at night, December 7th, 2009. And I said about 3 words to him. And he's got 27 years of sobriety. He knew I was drunk. And he said, I'm coming in. And I thought, holy shit. So I called my sponsee for protection. I called Beth and I said, Beth, you got to get up here fast. And she came right up. And my son came in. And he said, I know you've been drinking for a long time. And he said, but you're not going to be able to see your grandson as long as you're drinking. I won't expose him to that. And, he asked me the why. And he'd been in AA. He knew the why. He knew why I was drinking. I was an alcoholic. And I said, God, I just don't know. I love sobriety, but it just got me. It just got me, And that's how strong it is. That's how powerful it is. Because I did not want to drink. I loved sobriety. I loved the freedom of sobriety. I went to meetings and talked about how much I loved the freedom of sobriety. And yet I drank. So there you go. When you read on, 58 how powerful it is, believe it. If you don't already believe it, believe it. It's sneaky. It's sneaky as hell. And it loves to grab you when you're tired or when you have anxiety. It likes to grab you and talk lies to you. Whisper in your ear. So that was my last drink. And I went back to AA. I never really stopped going to AA. I went and took chips drunk. And I'm not proud of that. But, I tell you about that so that you don't have to experience that. I believe in the 12 steps. I believe that the program is the 12 steps. I had a spiritual awakening many times, and I'm awake. I'm spiritually awake. I try not to offend people today. Anger, I'm a silent scorn person. I'm not going to swear at you or say anything really mean to you. But if looks could kill, you'd die, on the spot. And I'll plan my revenge in my head. And so I run to Max, and she settles me down, and all of a sudden I feel comfortable, and I'm back to me, and I know everything's going to be okay, and I'm back on, I'm back on. So for 3+ years now, I've been back on. And I feel very, very solid in my sobriety. I'm not overly confident because I saw what happened to me before. And I see people go out and I see people die. I go to AA every day. While I've been in the desert, I go to AA sometimes twice a day. I am an AA cheerleader. I love it. It's where I feel at home. It's where I feel best. And for the people that say, well, I used to go to AA, but I don't need to anymore, I say, ever heard of the 12-step? I don't get that. I don't get people not having to go to AA anymore because they're well. Because I thought that was part of the deal. You stay sober by helping somebody, thinking about somebody other than yourself. But that's just me. And I have a friend, Holly, and she's the only person I've ever met that likes AA as much as I do. So we go to meetings all over the place. We'll go over to Los Angeles to a meeting. We'll go over to Seal Beach to a meeting. We'll go to Newport, Balboa Island. We go to meetings all over the place. And every morning I go to my home group, Perez Plaza, for a morning meeting. And I go to a women's meeting. I go to a big book meeting, I go to a step meeting, I go to a women's meeting, because women are different than men, if you haven't noticed. And we have different issues. And women can fool men, but we can't fool each other. Because when you're bullshitting me, I know it. And that's one of the gifts of the program, that we can be honest with each other. And we don't judge. You know, when they told me first about AA, they said, we don't judge, just don't judge. And I said, but I'm a judge. But now I'm not a judge anymore, but I do speak at institutions. You know, we sober up with strangers. And so I figure my children, my grandchildren, their children, they're going to sober up with strangers, not me. You know, nothing I ever say to my kids is going to make a difference. But it's a stranger. It's a stranger who's going to say something to them, who's going to touch them, and offer AA to them. So anyway, Sundays in the desert, I go to the ranch. And the ranch is 57 men who are two-time losers out of the California penal system. And they're all drug addicts and alcoholics. So this is their last chance, the ranch. And on Sundays I go up. I've spoken there, been their speaker. And, you know, it's funny because they all hate judges. You know. And by the time they leave, they think, oh, she's okay, you know. Maybe these other judges aren't so bad, you know. But I figure by giving to them, then some stranger, somebody I don't know, is going to give it to my kids and my loved ones and my friends' children, you know, that I care about and that I love. So that's what I do today. I share my experience, strength, and hope, and all my fallacies and all my weaknesses, and hope. You know, Holly said, I said, well, you know, they wanted to know if I wanted my talk recorded, and I said, no, I don't want to be on record as saying this stuff, you know. And she said, call them back. So I promised her I'd say, hi, Holly, on my tape. So hi, Holly. And thanks. Appreciate it.